Sounds like a phaser?
Yeah.
Hey everyone, it's Dick here. Today I'm riding a 1992 Yamaha GTS 1000. Produced between late 1992 through 1999, the GTS 1000 is a liquid-cooled inline 4-cylinder electronically fuel-injected engine, putting out 102 brake horsepower at 9,000 RPM and 106 Newton meters or 78.2 foot-pounds of torque at 6,500 RPM. It is 5-speed, chain-driven. It has ABS, which was unusual for the time. It has a catalytic converter, also rare for the time. It has a 31-inch seat height and a 59-inch wheelbase. It weighs 553 pounds without fuel and has a 5.3-gallon fuel capacity. It has 17-inch wheels front and back, although the 180 rear tire makes the rear sit a little taller than the 120 front. It has monoshock rear suspension. The front brake is a 6-piston caliper on a 330mm single disc. What else can I say about this bike? Let me see. Anything else? I think that's it. Oh wait, I guess I should mention the Parker design RADD single-sided front suspension, known as a parallel arm front end. James Parker's RADD suspension was the future back in the 90s. Designed to eliminate telescopic fork suspension, RADD suspension changes the angle of the force hitting the wheel away from the steering mechanism of the motorcycle and into the frame. Other than inspecting the knuckle arm joint every 8,000 miles, the RADD suspension didn't require as frequent or as involved maintenance or servicing as front fork suspension. And other than the RADD suspension prematurely wearing front tires, there was very little criticism of the system beyond its high price. The suspension, along with all of the other cutting-edge, now commonplace technology, put the GTS's sticker price up to $13,000 new in 1992, which is why it was only imported in the USA for a year and ultimately ended its run in 1999. Despite the short-sightedness and shallow pockets of the Americans, this GTS survives, and I'm thrilled to take it for a ride. I will say, the rider geometry and the height of the fixed windshield, combined with my own modest stature, found the wind blowing right under my chin and into my helmet. Consequently, this has impacted the audio commentary for this ride-along. If you are unable to endure the wind noise of this video, please check out the companion video to this one, inclusive of studio-recorded commentary. Or better off, watch them both.
Jesus Christ. Hey everybody, it's Dick here. I am on a 1992 Yamaha GTS 1000. It belongs to the proprietor of Lane's Yamaha, and he has kindly let me take it out. It is what we in the motorcycling community call a unicorn. It is a lottery bike. If you were to have a motorcycle or a list of motorcycles that you would buy or you would track down and find and buy if you won the lottery, this bike is on a lot of lists. It's definitely on my list. Not so much because of its performance, because it's kind of a heavier version of a FJR 1200 or a Phaser 1000. It has the Phaser 1000 inline 4 engine in it from the 90s, which was notorious for leaking oil. I've been told that this engine hasn't leaked a drop of oil, which means it's that much more of a peach than I thought it was before I got on it. But it is a sportier sport tourer where you're leaned forward a bit more. You kind of got a long tank, full fairings, car mirrors out front. It has electronic fuel injection, ABS. It has a lot of stuff that bikes have now as a matter of course, but did not have in the 90s, definitely the early 90s. This bike was only imported to the United States from late 92 to 94. its official release date or launch date in the United States was 1993, and then it stopped being offered in 1994. So it does not have a big run. It was offered elsewhere in the world, specifically Europe, until 99. But one of the failings, and I apologize because the way I'm leaning forward and my height and this windscreen means that I'm getting wind right into my helmet. So although it's going over my helmet and it's not uncomfortable, I'm getting a lot of wind noise in the helmet. So that might be affecting the audio, especially as I pick up speed. And this bike picks up speed so well, dangerously quickly. How fast I'm in top gear and going fast on this bike. But it's so long, it's so low, it's so stable. This is the quintessential sport tourer. But what made this bike unique, what makes this bike the lottery bike, the unicorn that it is the single side swing arm that it has on the front wheel. It has a single-sided swing arm, and the shock, it doesn't have forks. It's kind of a Yamaha version of a telelever, but even the telelever shock is higher up and more vertical than what's on this bike. This bike is it's a low-mounted, wide-gauge, single-sided shock that is more of a relaxed angle. It's not like a fork, it's not parallel, it's not horizontal. It's a relaxed shock and a shock angle that sends it right into the frame so that you get more of the suspension kind of in your rump as opposed to in your handlebars. There's no fork dive because there's no forks. And this was a design that was pretty, I'd say still revolutionary. And I think the only reason that it really didn't take off was that it was the cost. It was an expensive motorcycle to build, and the cost didn't really justify the improved stability that it was claiming, specifically under braking. They said that the lower mounted shock and the single-sided swing arm on the front end would increase stability for the rider and specifically stability under braking. I don't think it was so revolutionary or such an improvement in performance that justified the cost over traditional forks. There's a couple of bikes that have been out there with a single-sided swing arm monoshock situation, and the Bimoda come to mind, the Italian, now defunct motorcycle company, which was also a lottery bike. And what I'm finding interesting is the amount of vibrations I'm getting in the throttle hand and a little bit in the clutch hand and through the pegs. I'm leaning forward on this bike because of the geometry of it, the sportiness of the Sport Tourer. And it reminds me of kind of those Hayabusa geometry or those ninja Sport Tours where you're really far out front, the Kawasaki Sport Tours where you're really far out front with your hands leaning forward and you're kind of back. Despite the sporty geometry, it's a very comfortable geometry, and I know that Mr. Lane has brought this down to Georgia in November, and so it's a long distance tour, and I don't feel that my back would be too strained or stressed. Look at this mess. Over long distances, but that vibration would get to me, I think. It's a lot more vibey than I would have anticipated, or even, the only reason I'm mentioning it is because I didn't expect to experience it. But the unadjustable screen and the vibrations make this a lot less comfortable to ride than it implies. The seat is so cushy. And he's got this Corbin aftermarket touring seat on it, which is just... I've never sprung for a Corbin seat because they're so expensive, but... Whoa, I can see where the money's been spent on this because it's so comfortable. It's incredibly fast. It's a sleeper fast. Like, I feel like I'm going 30 and I was just going 65. I looked down earlier and I was in top gear and I was going over 70. And I was just loping through these turns and completely ignorant of the speed because of the comfort at speed that this has. It's so planted and so plush. It's almost like someone else is riding it. I just got off the VMAX and I said the VMAX, you need to respect it and be in it 100%. You need to be in the ride. And Kyle said something after I dropped it off. Kyle's the guy who owns the VMAX, and he said, you have to pilot it. You pilot the bike. And that's very much an apt description or an apt observation. You have to pilot the VMAX, where this is, it's so plush and so comfortable that the only input you need is to make sure that you're restraining yourself. It's not an aggressive bike. I'm sure it f***ing hauls. I'm sure it goes like a bat out of hell. And I'm sure a more aggressive rider than me will be able to thrash this thing. But I don't think this thing is designed for thrashing. I think this thing is sophisticated. You kind of forget the fact that there's an engine underneath here because of how smooth the fairings are and how everything fits into one another. It's almost spaceship-like in how it clicks together. And if it would daunt me to need to do any maintenance or mechanics to it, because I would have to penetrate. I'd have to penetrate this shell, this smooth 90s melted jelly bean wonderfulness of it, the beauty of it. And so it's very much a sophisticated, grown-up motorcycle. More sophisticated. When I think I called it's sophisticated. It's mature. This is a motorcycle that's owned by someone who will never turn a wrench. And I don't mean to disparage Mr. Lane, who I know is a accomplished mechanic, and he will definitely turn the wrench on this, but I think most of the people who would buy this, most of the people who would own this, or the target market, were the people who would bring it in for scheduled service and not know what happens under the fairings, not know what happens under the plastics. And being on it, I feel a bit daunted by it. Even looking at it, looking at the geometry before I threw a leg over it, I was daunted by the stretch of it. I was daunted by the length of it. I was daunted by the glitz of it, the glamour of it. It's a beautiful, handsome, refined motorcycle. It's kind of like when you looked at a Mercedes-Benz back in the 80s, you know, before they made hatchbacks. You looked at them and there was a reverence to them before, like, oh, I don't belong in one of those. That's too fancy for me. That's too fancy for me. But this thing is just so sophisticated and refined, and I mean, if I goes, and it goes there quickly. It gets up to speed fast. It gets up to speed fast. But you feel like you're on rails. You're just gliding along. This is an airliner. You're just gliding. It's so plush. It's so comfortable. There's no... I haven't... Other than the vibrations from the engine, I think. Yeah, it's definitely engine vibration I'm getting in my hands. I have not felt the road. I have not felt one input, one undulation from the road. It's all smooth. It's like you're floating on air. It's an airliner. And I feel like I'm crawling around these turns, and I really have to increase the speed, but then I looked at the speedometer and I'm actually going faster than I would normally come around these turns. It's a really unique ride experience. I don't think I've ever experienced a ride like this. He did warn me before I took it out that the brake lever and pedal are spongy, and I think that's being kind. They're soft. I feel like I'm bottoming out the pedal, and I feel like I'm about to hit the handlebar with the lever. And he said that has something to do with the ABS system, and they're trying to work out how to address that. But the engine braking on this inline 4 is just so predictable. It reminds me, I mean, this is the same generation as my FC6, a little younger, but this is the FC1, the Phaser 1000 engine, and it's predictable. It's you can engine brake with it. You don't really rely too heavily on the brakes all that much. I'm trying to see where the RPMs are hitting me with this vibration. It just seems to be everywhere, so I think it's probably just the nature of this bike, of having a bit of vibes in the handlebars, which is a bit of a detractor. I have to admit it does detract from the experience. Oh, interesting. Above 4,000 RPMs, those vibes disappear. So it's just around 3,000 RPM you get those vibrations. Wow, it's just on rails. It's on rails. I don't think I've ever ridden a motorcycle that rides this smoothly. Unbelievable. Oh. Smooth as glass. No vibration. I'm floating. I'm flying through the air right now. I'm a fucking superhero. I am Superman. I am Kal-El. Oh my God. Then you don't have any brakes. But you got the engine braking. That'll do. A little taller than I anticipated. I'm kind of on the tips of my toes. Not so much of a lean when I'm flat on one side or the other. I'm always curious about the bikes that never make the grade in the US. The ones that are beloved elsewhere in the world, especially in Europe, and that should really do well in the American market and just never do, and they're here for a year or two as a test case, and then they disappear, and the lucky few who have them, like the Transalp. You can't get a Transalp in the United States. I mean, they stopped importing them, I think, in '89. I have to check, but the Transalp, 4 years, maybe 2 years, maybe this a year and a half. This bike should be one of the best sellers. But I can understand this is probably for '92, even probably for now, because of the technology built into that front end. They probably priced themselves out of the market. They did something so unique and so revolutionary that one, it scared off the tried and true motorcyclist who doesn't necessarily like all that much innovation or change. And then you priced out the ones who would buy it. It's smooth. I would see about putting, oh, there is some sort of bar end dampener there. I was gonna say, I would see about putting some sort of vibration dampener on this, because that is the only drawback I have found to this bike. I'm even getting used to the geometry, and I'm learning how these brakes work. So it's really not none of these are a concern to me. I'm just commenting on these vibrations because the bike is so smooth otherwise that any sort of interruption to that floating feeling, that flotation, that levitation, that weightlessness, and now I'm over 4,000 RPM, so that vibration has disappeared. But that vibration is really the only thing that interrupts. And it's kind of like when you're sleeping, it's the princess and the pea. That's what it is. It's the princess and the pea. The bed is so comfortable. But someone put a pea under that mattress. And this princess can't sleep through the night. So I think that's really but once you get over 4,000 RPM, and this red line's at 10.5 up to 12, so you can easily get over 4,000 RPM on this. And there's a lot of power. I mean, look at that. I was going to say those forks lift, but that's not a fork. That's suspension lifts. And you can see the front end coming up. I am the wrong height for this windshield though, because I'm getting a lot of, I'm not getting so much turbulence as so much wind noise. There's a lot of wind noise coming off this. I wonder how this would fare with no windshield. I kind of think it would be more fun. It's a monorail. You're in Tomorrowland. It's 30 years old. And you're riding the future. It's a time machine. Next year. What? Not next year. In 4 months. This will be 30 years old. 30 years old. And you're still riding the future. It belongs in Tomorrowland. Disney had a vision of the future, and he plunked it into Tomorrowland, and too bad time just slowly dragged on past it. But if you go to Tomorrowland and you see those things, that's still the future. The future that could have been. This bike is the future that could have been. The technology is so innovative still that it defies what it is. It defies how old it is. Jetpacks and flying cars and all of those conveniences and innovations and technology gone. Lost to imagination, lost to practicality, lost to austerity and the internet and online shopping. And this is a bike that defies how old it is. It's the future. It's a time machine. It's a multiverse vehicle. It's the evidence of what might have been. It's an artifact from a alternate reality. And I'm glad that it exists, and I'm glad that it's owned and cared for and loved, because imagination has hit a dead end. We need to do a U-turn and a reevaluation of what we think the future is. It's not billionaires going on joyrides. It's what can happen for the masses. It's not about individual accomplishment. It's about collective advancement. This is where I see how long it is. And heavy. Be forgiving. When this thing hits speed, the front end unweights. The vibrations disappear. And you're just levitating. It's almost like you are on a floating motorcycle. You're in an airplane. There's very little input required to slide this through the turns. There's very little, other than the wind noise that's happening in my helmet, there is no turbulence. Above 5,000 RPM, above 4,000 RPM, the vibration of the handlebars disappear. And you're just gliding through the air. You're floating on air. It is a very unique motorcycling experience. Most motorcycling experiences I have that are memorable are the ones where you feel the experience. You feel the vibrations, you feel the rumble, you feel the wind. This is polar opposite. It's the antithesis of a motorcycling experience. You are weightless. And it's disorienting, it's counterintuitive, but it's familiar. It's almost like those dreams you have when you're flying in a dream. You know it's unnatural. You know it's not commonplace. But at the same time, you completely know how to maneuver. You know how to go faster and slower. You know how to stop and observe and levitate. It's sublime. It's sublime. So I'm just gonna put my seat back here and I'm just gonna take a nap before we land.
If you like that video and you want to see more like them, hit like, share, and subscribe.